Creating your own work panel. I am an actor, writer, director. I make a lot of shorts for The New Yorker, Funny or Die, things like that. And let's go from you across. Introduce yourselves.
Great. My name is Victor Cruz. I know, not the football player. Share the same name. I started as an actor, stand-up comedian, then eventually became a writer, producer, director. I produce a lot of my own content, and thank you guys for having me.
Thanks for being here.
My name is Robin Rose Singer. I also started as an actor, became a writer, director, and producer. I work in commercial, TV, narrative, and documentary film.
My name is Tyler Hollinger. I'm an actor, creator as well. I really write stuff for myself, like my own projects. In addition, I direct documentaries now. Sorry, award-winning documentaries. I co-direct with Robin only. It's so exclusive co-director.
We have an exclusive deal.
Yeah, we have an exclusive deal with each other.
So my name is Sonja O'Hara. I am a filmmaker and an actor. And this year I sort of graduated to getting a deal for a show I'll be writing and directing. And I was one of the 10 filmmakers to watch this year. So.
My name is Michael Melamedoff. I began my career as an independent filmmaker. I now head up the film and television division of a company in New York called Cowboy Bear Ninja. With Cowboy over the past 2.5 years, I've set up a dozen television properties, ranging from pilots to full series orders. Most recently, I executive produced the series Shade, Queens of NYC. My company put out Liquid Science for Red Bull TV starring the Jizza from Wu-Tang Clan. I'm the director and producer of True TV's The Problem with Apu, Hari Kondabolu's doc taking on systemic racism through the lens of The Simpsons.
That was great.
Thank you. And this summer, my new game show, Paid Off, will be coming out on True TV as well.
That's awesome.
So no one's here has done anything. Right? All right, let's start with the idea, and we'll go across the room again, but just pick something that you made that's very dear to you, and just kind of like, how did that come about? What made you decide to make it? Why are you the person to tell that story?
It's interesting, because I think the very first time I directed something was this short film about the sterilization of Puerto Rican women during the mid-40s. And that project meant a lot to me, because I think that project, it was the first time I was directing, something that I wrote, but it was a story that I had never really heard about till Rosie Perez had released a documentary called Yo Soy Boricua. It was on HBO, and she highlighted this topic for just like a couple minutes, and it really interested me a lot. So that was the first project, but it was very special because it was very much in the realm of some of my favorites, like Alfred Hitchcock and a lot of the old Twilight Zone episodes. It kind of fit in that world, and I felt like I was definitely, I had done comedy pretty much my whole entire life, so everybody knew me as comedy. I did, comedy stuff, live comedy, and so when I released, right. So when I did this movie, I think a lot of people thought it was a comedy, and then they showed me, it was like, this is a serious short film about this particular topic, and then the film was in Spanish with subtitles. And so when I did the second short film, it was a totally different story, but very much in this voice of like Hitchcock, Twilight Zone, which I very much enjoyed, and I was discovering my voice, and I said, I think this is what my voice is. And so then when I went on to do my very first feature as a director, I went off on a totally different avenue. It was nothing like this voice that I had enjoyed so much. I still enjoyed the feature, but now there's a new project that I just finished. We just finished scripting. We had like a really awesome reading of it. Now we're looking into putting all the pieces in order to get the funding right for it. But this is now going back to that original voice. And I'm really proud of that. So it takes me back to the original project that I first did, which was me discovering what my voice was. And so I'm returning to that now and not compromising anything just because I'm trying to produce a feature film. So there you have it.
I think that's a good path to go down. Just speak to like your voice and why you have created, a project or two that you've created.
My ideas come from absolutely everywhere. I I keep like a list in my notepad on my phone of just things that I find are interesting. I wrote a film based on the Iraqi national football team during the Hussein regime that came from a news article and then consequently took 2.5 years of research to complete. I wrote a pilot that got produced last year that was based on an experience I have with my grandmother. It's a comedy about a senior living facility in the Bronx. I meet people on vacation and films come from that. I mean, it's literally anywhere at any time. I have like 7 or 8 projects in development that I just constantly work on. So.
First off, I just wanted to take a moment to just thank everybody in this room because I really have a lot of appreciation for you guys showing up for this, and I want to give as much value as I possibly can to you guys in this room. So please, by any means, anytime you have any questions, write them down, save them for the end, because I want to give as much to you guys as possibly I can be a resource for you. And if anybody wants to send me a DM or an email after this about how to do this, how to do that, please do, because I just want to give you value. I'm going to talk about man babies because that's what's here. So
We just screened.
we just came from the screening of that, and I have a lot of anxiety around children, other people's children, the thought of my own children. So I was like, oh man, what am I going to do when I have a child? And then I was like, well, what if I had a child? And I was like, oh, that could be a good story. So I feel like, my voice, when we talk about voices, whenever I sit down to write things, they just end up coming out comedy. I don't intentionally try and do that. I intentionally try to tell a story first, but then they devolve into this sort of Tyler's World of Comedy, which I don't know if you ever get a chance to see my other films, they're on keeping on the same track. And then I like to write for my friends, because to me, filmmaking, that's what matters to me. Having a good time with my friends. And that's the reason why to do this, because if you don't enjoy the people you work with, then why do it? Because, I come from a world where I don't have the luxury of making films with other people's money. So I make it with my own money, which is why it takes me every 2 years. I have to save up enough to make the next project, which is why I can't make them all the time. I am lucky enough to own a company that is able to fund those sort of things. I write with friends in mind, and then I go through a vigorous rehearsal process where I develop and workshop those voices into my own project in a collaborative nature. Very much I call it scripted improv, especially when we're on set, especially when I'm directing, because I want it to be true to the person speaking, very much so.
Awesome. My work is sort of all under the umbrella of dark, provocative, cerebral, weird. My first feature film was based on my own experience as an egg donor and dealt with eugenics and just what people will do to have these desirable designer eggs that they get from young women in New York. So there's definitely a feminist angle to everything that I do. It's really diverse and inclusive. My newest project, Doomsday, is about a matriarchal cult in the Catskills. And that was based on a weird experience I had where one of my first survival jobs in LA, I was cast in these weird industrial videos, and only later did people say, hey Sonja, you're starring in all the Scientology propaganda films.
Oh my God.
So I wrote about weird cults and sects, and that was that show. And my new show that's coming out with Adaptive Studios is about an academy of out-of-body travel and astral projection, and it's based on some recently declassified CIA files about Project Center Lane and all of this just weird astral projection stuff they tried in the 1970s on soldiers. So, but it's about young millennials with this technology. So yeah.
CAA was a Freudian slip. She's been having a lot of agency meetings.
CIA.
Another agency.
I'm on the other side of independent content creating at this point, since the work that I do is primarily for networks and studios. But I spent, 10 years in independent production. My story is that I spent my 20s killing myself trying to figure out how to cross the barrier to making my first independent feature film. And then I spent, the way that we all do, about 5 years making a movie that I really, really loved, and then watched it. This was 2009 at the tail end of the financial crisis. And I watched it hit the market, also in the emergence of VOD, video on demand, and a really changing landscape in terms of how sales agencies were thinking about digital and festivals. And I watched this movie that had been a passion project for me. Pick up a sales agent, pick up a distributor, go to a couple of festivals, and then die on the vine. And it was incredibly painful, and spent a long time, kind of a year after that, sort of mourning that film and thinking, maybe I wasn't good enough, maybe I'm not good at this, maybe, you know, the 10 years I devoted in my 20s trying to make things, you know, I was wrong about. And when I started to come out on the other side of that, I started to rewatch that movie and think, you know, this is a pretty good movie, actually. And maybe what I didn't understand were the mechanics of distribution and the mechanics of sales. And as this was happening, you know, kind of the universe of filmmaking started to change, because things like DSLR cameras started to become readily available to us. And suddenly YouTube was a viable means, as was Vimeo, for self-releasing content. And I started to proactively work towards making big ideas for impossibly cheap, and then figuring out how to self-release them, whether that meant just throwing things online for free, or figuring out sales and marketing plans of my own for movies and circumventing traditional sales companies and going right to distributors. And I did this with a number of films, a movie called The Exhibitionist that starred Laverne Cox, a small documentary called Victory, which was about a father-son duo, the father, a 70-year-old Korean emigre who was a commercially successful portrait painter, and his 25-year-old son, Korean-American, who basically left his job in finance to try and broker his father's transition into the fine art world. And I ended up selling that movie directly to a small distributor, and I think 6 people saw it, but one of the 6 people that saw it was Michelle Armour, a television executive producer who had created shows like The Chappelle Show and Strange with Candy and Upright Citizens Brigade. And she thought, you know, this story of cultural assimilation between an immigrant father and son, you might be the right director for this project I'm putting together called The Prom with Apu. And it sort of catapulted me in a really unexpected way into a mainstream television directing career, at the same time that I was trying to build my television producing company. So that's kind of my story.
I think that leads nicely to the next topic. I would love to just get into pitching and that sort of process, how you leverage connections, made it happen, because it sounds like everyone has had some sort of forward momentum with the projects they're working on.
So a lot of the projects that I have released have been also with my own money. You know, there have been some moments where I have been in a room and I have pitched ideas, and sometimes there have been interest, and sometimes, you know, you're kind of waiting to hear back, and then nothing ever comes of it. So, you know, just decide not to wait, to just, so in a sense, I'm pitching to myself. I'm pitching to myself, and I have to decide, am I going to go forward with this? Am I going to self-release my own project?
And how do you decide? What's the turning point for that?
You know, I guess it depends on the project too. Like some of the projects, for instance, were very low cost. So a lot of the times I felt like I could recoup on the project, or maybe I believed that I could recoup on the project because it was such low cost that I decided, well, I'll just release it on my own. You know, I have a certain kind of following and will reach people a certain kind of way. So to answer your question, the pitching process has been okay. It's been okay, but a lot of the stuff that I have released has been through my own company.
Oh boy, pitching. I have worked in various capacities on film and TV. So I've worked as a writer-creator, I've worked as a film producer, I've raised financing for projects, and I feel like I'm kind of always pitching, like no matter what, to someone, because there are just so many facets of the film industry that if you're a producer on a project, you are in charge of everything from start to finish.
That's a good point. I don't mean to cut in, you know, but
no,
I think that's such a good
it's a
point. You are
conversation.
constantly pitching. That's so true.
Constantly.
Even on a smaller level, just like trying to lock in locations or trying to get things for much cheaper, you know, just trying to get anything done that's in relation to your project. I mean, it is a version of pitching.
Yeah.
You know, you're pitching why the person should open the door to let you in to do this thing.
To sell someone on your dream.
Yeah.
That, you know, you're really passionate about.
Absolutely. Like, why should they care? So, you know, you kind of acquire a certain kind of skill.
Yeah.
And you figure a way to bring them in, but
No,
continue.
no,
'Cause I think you're
it's-
so right.
No,
You're
it's
so
true.
right.
I mean, we might as well just all talk
We're
as a
allowed to
group. I think, whatever. We're all friends, actually, kind of, in some ways. No, but it's true. I mean, you're always kind of trying to appeal to people to what it is about the project that should appeal to them in like 30 seconds or less sometimes. I mean, I literally, like, when we went to a screening of a docuseries at Tribeca last, or 2 weeks ago or something, and I saw one of the directors, and I'm like, I gotta tell you about this movie, like, in the lobby. It gets a little, like, but it worked, you know, we connected, and it kind of developed, and now we have an ongoing relationship. Like, I hate to say shameless, I don't like to, like, sell myself at people. It is about a conversation and kind of, you know, drawing them in and finding your common interests and why it is that this person should care about what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, about that, like, when you're pitching to somebody who knows who you are, I don't really consider it pitching. It's just having a conversation of what you're working on.
Right. But I have to cold call agents all the time, like to attach talent, for example. I'm producing a film in September, so I'm literally like calling WMENCAA, like, hey, what's up, you don't know me or anything about this film, but like you have to, you know, and then the door opens and you've got a very small window of time to sell them on your capacity to make some cool shit.
I think the thing that people forget about the pitch process is that it's an emotionally led process, you know, and it's really critical. I always think about development and pitching as kind of being side-by-side processes, and with that, production as well, you know, because what you're doing when you're pitching, when you're putting together a lookbook, when you're putting together a sales deck, when you're putting together comps, when you're talking to somebody face-to-face in a room about why they should come on board to work with you, what you're really laying out is a vision for a project, whether it's a film or a television show or a stage piece, whatever it is, you're laying out a vision. And that vision needs to do a few things. It needs to be really clear about what its values are. It needs to be clear about why it needs to be made, why it needs to be made now, and why you're the person that should be making it. And it needs to be really, really clear about what the promise of that project is to an audience. Because ultimately, wherever you're pitching your idea, whether it's at a dinner party with friends who, you know, and your pitch, this conversation between friends, is still taking up 30 seconds or 30 minutes of their time, or whether it's with somebody who's going to write you a huge check or grant you a location, they need to understand what the value proposition of what you're offering to them is. And that value proposition is not just financial, it is totally, totally emotional. And I think one of the things that people lose sight of all of the time is that passion matters, and understanding and being able to broach why something isn't just the thing that you're passionate about, but why there's an audience beyond you that is passionate about this, that will spend their time and their money to stream this or go to a theater or absorb this content in all the myriad ways we absorb content now, why they're going to dedicate that, you know, 2 hours to you. If you can't figure out how to do that in 5 minutes or 60 seconds, you've got a problem, because it's all part of the same tunnel, you know, as it were.
And can I just say too, like believing in yourself and believing in the project also is a big part of the pitch process. Because a lot of times if you don't believe in who you are or your project, neither will the person on the other side. You know, they'll just see the nervous energy that's occurring, because a lot of times you might be confident within yourself about a project, and then you go into pitch, and what ends up happening is you begin to get nervous because you think that you need to sort of, you see the person and you judge a book by its cover, and you start to pitch it a different way than you originally planned or intended. And so it changes the energy in the room. And you walk out the room and you start kicking your own ass because you say, that wasn't me, that wasn't my voice. So, you know, I love that you bring up the thing about the passion, the emotion, because you're absolutely right. You know, you can't forget the main ingredient, which is you, which is the reason why you wrote this. Yeah, there's business and there's numbers and there are things that are going to help sell the project, but I think more importantly, believe in you, because you spent a lot of time developing this project. Scripts don't happen overnight, and if you wrote the script, give yourself some credit, value. There's a lot of value in that script before you even receive a single cent or a dollar for it. And just know that if you don't believe in you or the project, it's not going to go so well. So take good care of yourself before you walk in that room, and say to yourself, hey, this is my time. Because sometimes you don't get that moment to be in that room
And
to pitch.
Well, I would love to hear Sonja's opinion on this too, because I know
she's
that
really good.
we both have just had some marathon LA meetings with some of the same people, and like what I found was I quickly went from the list of things that were this important in my project to like this, as you have more and more, and finding the passion, what it is,
Right.
what you're bringing to the table.
I've had kind of an interesting experience this year because I was a speaker at South by Southwest, on their episodic TV panel, and it was my first year where I was just kind of like thrown into the deep end of I'm suddenly surrounded by all the people who I've ever aspired to one day work with, when you think of it as like the long-term future as opposed to where you are right now in your actual career. So I would go, I was going to the festival, and I have management, but they're not, I mean, they're wonderful people, but it's still very much one of those things that I have to be proactive, and they're making 10% of what I'm ultimately going to be making, so I have to do 90% of the work. And I knew I was going to this festival, and I had access to everyone. And South by does an interesting thing where if you're an industry guest, they send you a spreadsheet of everyone from every agency, every production place, everyone that will be attending the festival. And I decided, this is insane, but I'm a panelist. I'm going to treat them like industry peers. And I emailed all the companies that I've loved, everyone that's doing the kind of work that I'm interested in, the Blumhouses and the A24s and just Paramounts and Warner Brothers. And I started to get responses from everyone. Now this was post the Oscars this year, where they were saying, take meetings with women. And suddenly, people, I would write in my subject line, read award-winning female filmmaker, South by Southwest, and suddenly the head of Lionsgate was writing to me. All of these people from all of the major studios, and they were saying that nobody reaches out to the level of like president of acquisitions, or that people are dealing with more low-end development people, and they're just, I was bypassing these steps by being confident and having moxie. So suddenly I'm going in and I'm taking these meetings, and they're not just generals, and it's also in the post-Me Too moment, no one will leave a young woman alone with a male executive. So I'm going into these meetings and there are multiple people. So I decided to take advantage of this window and came in really prepared, knowing I have a show that's a passion project, but these are some other shows that are still in the logline phase. And by the end of my week in LA, I had 2 different major companies that were interested in a project that was literally just an idea. It was not something that I had a full pitch deck for. It wasn't something that was an entire full script, and from my world, I'm used to when I have an idea, I went and made an hour-long drama myself that I went and produced that went to festivals. So suddenly I have a log line that's getting interest, and by the end of that week, I had a call from one of the major companies wants to commission me to write the screenplay for an idea that I haven't fully even fleshed out.
That's the dream. There's the
and I
motivation
didn't
right
know
there.
that was a thing. Like, I didn't go in and was like, you should pay me to write a script. Like, I literally just was like, well, this is something I'm excited about, but I'm working on other projects, so I'll get to it. And they're like, well, what if we pay you to prioritize it? And I was like, this is a good problem.
And I'll just say that, like, as somebody who's a buyer and a seller, like, I sell television to networks, but I also sign development deals with emerging talent that I'm passionate about. I take ideas at every phase. I take ideas at the long line phase. I'll sign ideas off of the conversation at a bar. If it strikes the right chord and people understand who I am as a buyer, and my buyers do the same. I have a network that gives me money to develop titles, and then looks at my list of titles and says, that's a really great title, that sounds like it belongs on our air. Now let's go develop, the log line.
And that's where it's so important to be really specific. Like, if I was going in for a buyer like him, you do your homework, you know what it is that they have done, what they're going to do, so you can really be part of that conversation. Like, I made sure I had super specific pitches and that I sort of knew the landscape, and I was obsessively reading the deadlines of varieties and everything else before I approached those buyers. So I was in a position where I wouldn't make a gaffe and pitch something that maybe they already have on their slate, and they became interested in my voice because you're really specific. If you think you can do it all, no one really knows what to do with you. So I would go in there, and then I would follow up with the really specific materials that we talked about, and I would try to do that fairly quickly, because otherwise they lose interest and they forget about it.
Well,
So it's, yeah.
And I think to your point, and something Victor said earlier, was you can find yourself adapting to different rooms, and it's important to figure out like what the core thing is of your project, because in the end you don't want to end up a generic log line on the list,
No.
right? And it's more valuable for someone like you who's showing what you're developing to different networks. Like, they all have their niches, and
You have to know what the project is. You have to know that it is going to change depending on the buyer. But that if the core values, and this is why I say that development is values-based, like, I bring a project into the room and I know the 3 things out of that project that really matter. Like the things that must remain intact. To that end too, and piggybacking on something that Victor said before, I will never bring a project into a room if I'm not passionate about it. You know, I only bring out material that I love, that I think is ready for the market. I won't rush a script into sale. I won't, you know, rush a pitch packet into sale. You know, early in my career, I felt the need to push things out the door as quickly as I could, in part because I think I felt desperate. I think we all do at some points in our career, feel that way. But I think it's really, really important to never lose sight of the fact that what I've learned to do over time is to approach every pitch like I have an opportunity for the person opposite the table with me to do something together. You know, that it's not that I'm there on bended knee asking for their resources or their money. I'm there because I've got a movie or a television show that is going to get made, and I'm giving them the opportunity to come make it with me.
And it's a collaboration.
Absolutely.
And the more that you can make it where you're truly excited about the executives' opinions, like when you go in there and you're like inflexible with the way that your show's going to go, I know people that have lost deals for that sort of thing. And if you're in there to meet somebody that you really admire and you like what they've done, you're lucky to get them to give you ideas and to be able to collaborate on that.
I've seen people lose series and second seasons that way, shows that should have 100% come back for a second cycle or a back order. Lose it because the creator was inflexible. And you have to remember, please never lose sight that, like, if somebody's writing you a check for $1 or $6 million, the second that you like deign to take their money, they're a partner in your process.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to be passionate about your project, but you also have to kill your darlings a lot of times, right?
All the
And
time.
pick your battles.
Yeah, and if someone has also, like we were talking about earlier, like believed in your dream and signed on as a partner, then you have to respect that too.
But, and you know, to Sonja's point, like, look, the best executives are as good at being creatives as you are. And like, I just have to say, like, one of my most important mentors in this industry is Leslie Goldman at True TV, who, you know, has spent 20 years making television. And when she gives me notes, I understand that those notes are coming off the back of thousands of produced hours of television. And they're not, you know, a gut reaction. They're not notes that come from nowhere. The notes, sometimes they're brilliant, sometimes they're not brilliant. The point is, like, usually the spirit of the note, though, is right. But the point is that I always owe it to a great partner to try and figure out how to make their note work. And the more you respect your partners, the easier and the better that gets, you know?
Yeah. Any questions?
Yes.
Sonja.
Yes.
Okay, so I started in AGR, so I learned how to make my films, and I was always like, the next one has to be better, the next one has to be
Yes,
better.
right.
And the next one's gonna be with a red camera.
Yes.
So my question is, for those beginner intermediate filmmakers, how do you then go to the level where you are, where you're getting these amazing deals from these different studios? How do you get an agent to look at your idea and then pitch it? Or
For
do you-
me, it was festival strategy. It was when I get that project into a festival, even if it's not like a Sundance or a South by, there are so many, if you're doing a short film, right now, if you can target that and say that you're using it as a pilot or proof of concept as a potential TV idea, I found that the TV festivals are more of a meritocracy than a lot of the major film festivals. And I went from having a pilot that I did on $8,000 to getting meetings with HBO and AMC by submitting it to just all the TV festivals, and then everyone else was making short form comedy that was kind of derivative of something else. Like everyone was trying to do a Broad City or a Girls, and mine was really different than that. So
Sex
it's like,
cults.
find sex cults. So it's like trying to find that voice and that thing that is more specific to you and better what you want to tell, as opposed to trying to please people and like the trends that are already out there, because that's the story you're going to be able to tell better than anyone else. Then when I'm at those TV festivals, I will look at all the panelists that are speaking, and I will then email the people by, you know, going on IMDb Pro and finding their contacts, and if they're doing work that's similar to my work, and I can specifically mention something that they've done that is meaningful to me and make it a conversation, I found that people will go and take coffee with you. I don't ask them to do coverage on my script. I don't ask them to make an introduction. I just asked them to go and have coffee with me, because at one point they were on their way up too and were looking to make those connections. And that was how, after doing that, I ended up getting these meetings with agents, but it ended up being through going to festivals, following up with executives. I met an executive on this last trip from Lionsgate, and he made a call to CAA for me because he liked my work. I didn't ask him to do anything other than have coffee with me. And it was just finding your people and not being delusional and thinking, oh, I can be Disney, because that's not my voice and it's not who I am. But if you can find your tribe and you can do similar work, I found people are really receptive helping you out.
Once you go meet them for coffee, do you try to say, are you interested in working on this? Or do
No,
you just let the
I ask
universe?
them nothing other than I've done tons of research on who they are and how they got there. Like I met an executive at Sony. He used to be a casting director at Evie Kaufman, one of my favorite casting offices in the city. I talked about how he got there, and I was really excited about him. And I think that if you can convey enthusiasm, that they get excited about you. And then from there, he called me in for a proper pitch meeting, but I didn't ask him anything. I did say, here's a trailer for my project in the initial cover letter, but I didn't send links or any attachments because then it's not going to go through that spam filter over a paradigm or whatever.
Links always.
So just have that good human connection. They know that if you're an actor or a writer, they know you want representation. I never ask them the obvious thing. I just ask them for coffee and try to have a meaningful human connection.
Thank you.
That's awesome. You. I think you touched on something important with formats, like short films and maybe turning it into other things. I know Adaptive is doing interesting things where they actually will commission like a 10-part piece that adds up to 60 minutes so they can actually go out. It can live sort of as a digital series, but then can become a pilot or something like that. I don't know if you guys want to speak to, maybe starting with Sonja, but speak to how you've approached formats and, I know Tyler has a pilot that also chunks into a web series. I think it's very interesting because you can use a short as a calling card, then maybe repurpose it. People see it, they say, what's next? Oh, it could be a feature, or we can chop it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think my show with Adaptive, I knew that I wanted to be doing long form episodic, and I didn't want to be stuck in the 10 by 10 world forever, which is 10 10-minute episodes, just because the Netflixes and stuff, even though they're starting to play with short form, no one quite knows what to do with these small increments. So when I'm writing, I'm thinking how if I'm doing 6 10-minute episodes like Adaptive is commissioning me to do, I'm thinking I want it to have where I have 2 badass half-hour episodes, because Starz is a network that is commissioning half-hour dramas, and that's one of the only places that do it. So I'm constantly thinking when I'm in the writing phase, how can I write this in a way and edit it later that it doesn't just have to exist as one form, but if I want to be doing an hour-long drama on like a Hulu, how can I make this appealing for that? And when I'm pitching, I'm just thinking about telling good stories that transcend just being a feature film and have the HBO and those places we love the limited series, we love those anthology series, but they often don't make enough money. People want you to pitch a traditional show that can go into 7 seasons of it because that's where the money is for the networks. And I was going in and pitching these like really trendy like 8-part limited series things, and everyone's like, yeah, that's not really where the money is. So it's like knowing the landscape, but then also just pitching ideas that you're passionate about. And I just cornered the people at Adaptive Studios at a party at a festival and pitched them, and that's how I got a meeting. So don't be afraid to just talk to people.
I thought I saw a hand go up. But the other thing that I think you guys should really be aware of if you're releasing short form content of your own, I think there's 2 things that are really critical about it. The first is it's a great initial measuring stick for an audience, and the ability to prove that an audience is going to come to your work and that you're able to build an audience. Now, the problem that I see with so many emerging content creators is that they think their audience are their friends, and unfortunately, like, no matter how great, how many instances of followers you have, like, those metrics don't add up to very much of anything. So there's two things, I think, maybe 3 things that you can really do with this kind of short form content. The first is really prove out an audience, and one of the things that I don't think independent content creators think enough about are social ad buys. When they're releasing their content, I don't think enough content creators are thinking about how they are getting their work to an audience outside of their peer group, outside of their friend group, because let's be honest, like, your friends barely have enough time to watch the thing that's like on their Netflix or Amazon queue right now. Like, maybe they'll come and watch the first episode of your 10-part web series. Retaining them through 10 parts is really hard, and the way that you build an audience that's passionate about your work that you're going to retain is by blasting your content out wide. The second thing, and this is the most important thing, frankly, is you have to make sure that the content you're putting out there has an unshakable voice, and I think that's something that's really true about a lot of the content that I've seen Sonja putting out over the last couple of years, is that there's a perspective that's incredibly clear. You very quickly start to recognize that this is work that is coming from an individual with a series of beliefs and things that they're working through in their work. And when you look back at Issa Rae and Secure, you look at Broad City, you recognize that even though their early kind of low fidelity entries into the market were just that, were super lo-fi, the thing that was undeniable was their point of view. And that, while it certainly has evolved under the stewardship of great production companies and great networks, their voice was always there. The last thing I'll say, look, again, Sonja's work is work that I've been very, very aware of over the past couple of years, because at every television festival that I've gone to as a panelist, they're there, and their posters are there, and their work is super, super visible. They invested in good marketing materials. They had a way of being fearless in terms of getting themselves out there. I'm specifically
The whole
speaking.
cult traveled together with their burlap across the country like a traveling circus.
But I would run into other people that had worked on the project, like Karen, and they would just they would be out there evangelizing for the show in a very real way. So sell the shit out of your content and build an audience. I can't say enough about that.
I invested in a publicist early. It's a dirty word as a creator. But honestly, when I put together my very first Kickstarter when I was still doing crowdfunding, I made sure that I had a publicist, and I reached out to so many, because people think it's just like representation. It's hard to find the right one. I found somebody that was looking for a female filmmaker, that they had the Daniel Radcliffes and really big people, but they were willing to work for me for less because they wanted to fill out their roster. So it became a symbiotic relationship. And those press pieces ended up being the things that helped me get the visibility, that helped me get into certain rooms or to get into certain festivals. And then I would put a trailer on social media, and a festival would reach out to me and say, hey, would you submit your project, and maybe offer a fee waiver, which is really helpful when we're on your way up.
Yeah, I mean, about that, you'd be surprised just how much asking can get you. If there's a festival that I'm looking forward to, I'll find a contact information to say hey, I really like your festival, really like what you guys are about, can you offer a waiver for me? And they'd be like, well, we can't offer you a full waiver, but here's 25%.
Yeah, it adds up.
So, don't be afraid to ask for what you want.
I think an interesting topic could be producing your own work and things like that, and how you sort of find the magic number of what you're going to spend on a proof of concept or something like that. Not the specific number, but for instance, I've worked on projects that ended up landing on a platform, but they probably spent, since it's a digital platform, 3 times as much as I would have if I was on something as a director. I didn't really have say that the creators did in terms of what cameras and lighting and all that sort of stuff, but just judging that do we really need the camera that they shot The Revenant on for this web series, which is something that happened to me, which was happy to work with the equipment, but I was guys, we just want to get this out next week. So maybe speak to that, because you're all creating and pitching and spending your own money.
I'm a big fan with write with what you have. There's no reason to write for what you don't have, in my opinion. That's how you make things on the cheap, is what's readily available and how do you write it into your script. That's been the case I've done with all my films, because I'm the one financing it, so I know I can get this location by just asking a friend a favor. I don't have to pay them, or we can get this catering for free because it's somebody's mother, it's their restaurant, or whatever.
Chipotle is great at giving you
Chipotle
free
does,
burritos.
Chipotle will give your crew a free day of burritos.
Yeah.
So I'm always about write with what you have readily available.
I would say be really thoughtful. Don't look. First of all, think about where your series is going to eventually live if it does pick up a buyer, and think realistically about that. Think about what those budgets might look like, and if you have questions about what those budgets look like, I can tell you very clearly who is spending what in the market. But don't. If you're making a proof of concept for a digital independent web series, and I truly mean proof of concept. I don't mean shooting a 60-minute episode, although if you're going to go do that, by all means, go do it. But the reality is that there still is not really a huge market for independent pilots to be bought. It doesn't exist. What there are now there's a rising tide of great festivals like Series Fest and ITV, which are incredible conduits in putting creators side by side with buyers, and building, and that allow for relationship building. I mean, that's how I met Tyler. You know, I met him at one of these festivals 6 months ago, and when he said to me, "You want to come do this panel with me today?" I was like, "Absolutely," because I really like Tyler, and that's how this thing is supposed to work. Like, you go about building these relationships, and over time, hopefully, they also become business relationships. But be really, really thoughtful. What I would say is, think about post, because so many of these independent projects die in post because you don't have the time and the budget and the resources allocated to editing your piece, to doing great sound design, which matters, to putting a basic color pass on it, which matters. Spend on post. You know, be really thoughtful about that. I see this not just with independent television, but with independent films all the time. People are like, "We'll raise post later," and then 2 years later, there's like an unfinished film sitting on a hard drive somewhere, and it's the worst.
Well, also, if it's meant to help pitch, be realistic and maybe do a cut yourself. Things like that. Like if it has to go to air or get bought, then yeah, you hire an editor. But like if you're making a sizzle,
Well, if it's a sizzle,
cut it together.
find a great editor who's off. Like this city is filled with great TV editors who have big periods of downtime and will come to cut a great 3-minute sizzle for you, which is exactly what you should be bringing into a network. A 3-minute sizzle. It should not be longer. Find them, pay them $3,000 and have them cut it. They'll do a really good job. They'll do 2 to 3 passes with you with notes, and they'll deliver on something that is ready to go to a real development buyer, and that is better to show than sometimes a half-hour pilot is, because frankly, like, most of us have limited bandwidth and limited time. So if you send me a 3-minute sizzle, I will watch it. If you send me a 22-minute pilot and it doesn't grab me right away because the audio mix isn't great or because it doesn't jump off the page at first or whatever, I will stop watching it at that 3-minute mark anyway. And then the other thing is, again, invest in a publicist. Invest in, if you are releasing a digital web series on your own, invest in a social media buy. Like those are critical.
Well, and Michael, maybe something you can speak to on both sides is, I mean, I've heard from a lot of networks that they actually get less interested when you have a full pilot because they feel boxed in a little bit. If you spent all this money making the perfect thing, they have nothing to add to the mix. So a lot of times,
I would never deign to bring a completed pilot into a room. I sell, assets that I sell television shows are bespoke to the project, right? So I set up an animated series last year, and with that I walked in with 20 pages of storyboards and a 30-second animation test in addition to a full-on television Bible and treatment. I've sold other shows off of 3 minutes of tape. I've sold shows off of a conversation in the room with the talent sitting next to me. You have to know what the right asset is to have, obviously, but no, nobody's going to watch. If I were to walk in with a pilot, nobody would watch it, short of my having already put it online and it's already gone mega viral somehow.
And even if it has, I can say that I had a pilot, an hour-long pilot, won all the awards, did all the festivals, got all the things, and yet we would go into rooms and people didn't know what to do with it. It's not like making an indie feature that people can buy and put on VOD. There still is not a market for an indie pilot that is fully made, even if it's beautiful, even if it's better than anything that they would incorporate notes to make it a final product. And after pitching and going around with this fully done pilot, people would watch it and they'd be like, "This is great, but we don't feel like we know what we can add to it." So then my managers were like, "What if we just pretend your whole thing doesn't exist, we chop it up, take the really sexy sizzle reel, and we got a deal within a month."
Was this Doomsday?
That was for Doomsday, and it was just pretending that the rest of it didn't exist. And then it was ridiculous because they kept on wanting more and more, and then I was sending them scenes from it that were like fully done, and they're like, "Wow, but didn't. It's fully done, and
it
now
becomes a dialogue then,
yes.
because they feel like they're adding to it and becoming a partner with you.
Yes. So less is more, and I made 2 hours of that damn show, and like it gave me a career and it gave me the things. So I'm glad that I did it, or I wouldn't be in the position that I am now. But for my next shows, I'm literally just filming proof of concepts or like a 10-minute digital pilot if I really want to go wild.
I'll say this, which is that, like, thing is, you get to a place where you start to see so much content all the time. Like, I see so much content, I read so many scripts, I see so much TV, I make so much TV. And the thing that you start to realize too is, like, I've been a judge on a number of independent, television festivals over the past year, and you see a lot of content. And even the best content, there are holes that you start to see, and there are holes because at the end of the day, this isn't being done on a network budget. It
We
might
have no
be
writers'
non-union.
rooms, you know?
There's no writers' room. Like, and so this is the thing. It's like your best 3 minutes, if they're truly great, are probably better than however impressive it is that you actually put together a 42-minute, hour-long pilot. A television hour. There's just not going to be the same holes, and so you don't invite me to. You're not asking me to look past those holes. You're only asking me to look at what's great, and that matters.
And people are more intrigued by the idea of a really good trailer. It makes them ask questions, and it makes them want to imagine where it can go and to see the whole scope of that series. And I found that I now make my visual pitch decks the same way, where I'm not giving them all the answers, and I'm not doing episode by episode log lines in that initial deck. I'm just making them want to ask more and to bring me in to pick my brain. And then I find that they're more interested in throwing ideas back to me that I can incorporate into the Bible I give them later, and that makes them want to greenlight things.
Yeah. I did actually sell a pilot off a script, which I think is probably kind of rare, it seems like. But when I say that, I say it with the caveat that it went through about 4 months of endless notes. I can't even count how many drafts I'm saying, like past 20. It was just like, it would have been probably easier for me just to have sold it from a pitch, I think, with the amount of work and input and development that went into it.
Well, and
It changed significantly throughout the process.
in the spirit of like creating your own stuff too, for those who can't make the perfect pilot that Sonja maybe made. If you make a 3-minute pitch and the audio is not great, it's not like asking someone to watch a half-hour thing that was like 70% of the way there. They're a lot more forgiving when they're watching things like that.
But
Yeah.
spend that money on a good sound person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Spend that money
absolutely.
on that good editor, a good DP, a good gaffer.
Great
That's
sound
all I
designer,
need.
great
Right.
music.
Yeah.
Like,
And then feed people well. And you'll have a happy crew that are making beautiful things. And then no one knows that I didn't use the Arri Alexa and that I really used like the 5D. Like no one knows if you make it look beautiful what it was shot on.
How long did you shoot Doomsday for?
I mean, I shot it, I had the time of getting a bunch of actors who believed in this weird vision to go and stay in a friend's house in the Catskills, and we shot for probably 14 days per episode, per hour-long episode. But that isn't something that I would normally get to do. It was just one location of like the forest.
Right.
And, I was able to save a lot of money on not having company moves. And just
Did you shoot that on DSLRs?
No, I mean, we shot that on the Sony A7S because we needed something that was great with low light. And so much of it is like skinny dipping in the twilight and stuff like that. So. But we used minimal gear, a 3-person crew, and you couldn't tell when you saw it. So people later were like, okay, great, if she made that on X tiny amount of money, what can she do with, X bigger budget, which to a studio is still nothing, but to me is all the money,
I would love to open up questions now if you guys are. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Let's see the hands and you first.
Sure, yeah. Hey, so I have questions about once you have that 3-minute sizzle reel, where are you guys like sending it to? Who are obviously you were talking about like building relationships with people that you meet in festivals and then like just making those awesome like cold call emails and reaching out to people that you don't necessarily know. But I'm guessing like when you haven't done your own like narrative web show and you're just like focusing on narrative short films, like how can you get begin to get the funding to make the longer web projects? So that's a big question.
I mean, to get the funding to make longer stuff, I'm a little jaded in terms of other people because like, why wait? Why wait for anyone to give you the money? That's just my opinion. Shoot it yourself on what you have with what you're doing because the act of building the plane as you fly it is so much better than waiting till you build the plane. Because not only will
Only in the metaphor.
Yeah, unless you're Tyler's line producer. Just kidding.
From me speaking from my experience, this is my fourth project now, and the act of it being up and running already attracts people to you.
Yes.
So the idea of like, oh, I don't know who to send it to, as opposed to like, I'm gonna wait to find the person to send it to, then I'm gonna make the project. Just make more projects. And that act of creating on any level will attract things and things will happen. I mean, Sonja's projects and the actors she brought in, then the fervor which they went forth into the party circuit to talk about her projects created it only because that project had already been up and going.
But it still wasn't even my first project. The first thing that I ever made was a feature film that I just went from never having made a short, and I was insane, and I made a whole feature. And I didn't wait for other people to give me money. I made a feature on like $20,000. And that was hard to do, and it wasn't like the most cushy shoot. But the reality is that, unfortunately, no one's gonna give you money probably unless you're like, have all the nepotism things. Most people aren't gonna give you money to make your first project. You go and make that project on a micro budget, and then if people like it, then you have opportunities from there to potentially have other projects funded. But I know this stuff wouldn't be happening if I made multiple projects before somebody else was like, here's money. You know?
And I think we can all speak to that. Like all of our careers kind of share that, which is we just like made stuff for as little as we could and as much as we could. But let me ask you this. So let's say you could make a 3-minute teaser trailer tomorrow. Like, what's that project? Like, what is the project that you want to, tease, as it were?
Yeah, tons. Like 3.
Are they comedies? Are they dramas? What is it? Like, what are you trying to make?
Sure. I mean, like the one that I'm focusing on right now is like an LGBTQA youth superhero.
Okay, great. So so the first thing you have to think about is like, who is actually buying content in that space? Like, who is inclined to buy content in that space? And like, you've got to go and do homework, and you've got to figure out that it's a place like Reverie, which is a new AVOD service that is going through a Series A round right now that is aimed exclusively at the LGBTQ market. It's Logo, it's VH1, it's MTV. It was full screen until they stopped buying a few months ago. But you have to go do kind of your homework, and you have to say like, this is the content. What's the best way to show out this content? Like, how do I find? And the issue is always going to be gatekeepers, right? Like, there are gatekeepers, and you have to figure out how to get past them, and it's a nearly impossible thing to do. And kind of the only way you do it is doing what we've all done, which is just make and make and make and make until somebody sees your work. But what you can start to kind of try and figure out, and the best way you can, is like, how do you get to those gatekeepers' assistants? Like, how do you get to the people who are on their way up, who are your peers, and maybe aren't empowered to be buyers yet, but are working towards that? And you've got to kind of figure out the pathway towards getting your work in front of them. And you have to get very, very creative about that.
And social media can be your friend. I had an agent, an assistant from ICM that saw my work and called me in just from posting stuff on social media and being savvy about that. So that's something we all can do, just be writing and being proactive and posting little clips of the things that you're doing.
And if you're making stuff all the time, just keep posting. I mean,
Yeah.
even weirder, what you probably wouldn't expect, I was posting things on LinkedIn before I had any agents or management. And I went into IFC and True TV just because I had been posting content, like short form stuff on LinkedIn. And I was like, just keeping it alive for some reason. And then somebody in original development like went through and wrote me a note. So really, like, I would just say create and put it out there and like hone your voice.
I talk to absolutely everybody. I'm sorry. I don't
No. I had that moment. You had that moment.
Yeah.
We got it at the same time. It came. That's what it was.
Yeah.
But you get it first. You're my old friend from.
I know, we're having a reunion.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, I literally talk to absolutely everybody. People on the subway, people in the bars.
Robin knows everyone.
It just became that way though, because everyone's connected by like less than 6 degrees of separation, definitely. But I go to all the festivals, I go to events and like parties, things, anything anyone invites me to. I go to premieres, I go to my friends' screenings. You take a genuine interest, you show up, and then you talk to every single person that you can in a friendly, genuine way, because, it's about forming relationships. It's about connecting to people.
And people who agree to talk on one of these panels want to talk to you.
Yeah, that's why we do these things.
Sure, yeah.
I know.
I met you at your screening at Tribeca, right?
I met you first at Alex
That's right.
I met you first at Alex Sturgeon's birthday party.
That's true.
And then we reconnected
That's
at Rebecca,
true.
and then
Yes.
This
And
guy,
I know Alex Tuchin because I was in a film lab.
and then
with
this
her.
guy,
she's
cold,
one
like
of my
out of
best
nowhere, I
friends.
was a judge at ITV last year, and I got a random invitation from a guy I'd never met before named Tyler Hollinger, and he's like, I made a thing called Man Babies. Here it is in your Facebook like
Yeah.
inbox.
And also,
And I was like, hey, Robin Singer's in this thing.
Yeah, it's
And then I showed up
such
to
a
like
small
their
world.
party at the festival.
yeah,
I was
so
like,
I threw.
why not?
I saw that the festival had parties. I was like, I'm just gonna throw our own party because we have our own house.
We had a house.
So I dubbed it the Man Baby's house. I was like, there's gonna be a party at the Man Baby's house, and I sent it to everyone who was at the festival. And you know, they're
People
like,
showed up.
what? You're
Yeah.
doing a party?
It's great.
And
I
if there
also-
are no events, you should make
Yeah,
an
and
event.
then I also did a tailgate at
Yes.
the events of ITV. So we'd roll up with a car,
Diapers?
open it up, and just
No.
hand beers out. Just hand beers out to
Crazy.
all the industry, whatever.
That's
And then everybody would just hang out at the car until the cops came. And we
And Tyler, I will say this about Tyler, he is like, shameless isn't the right word. He's very forward with his promotion. Like when he says tailgate, he means he put the poster for the show next to the booth.
Next to the
And
booth.
everybody knows.
And everybody would just hung out and chatted
Yeah,
for a
and then we
little
all
while.
just hung
But
out.
also, I didn't sell people in that situation. You were there to hang out and chat. That's
exactly.
it. I didn't sell people.
Right.
One other thing I want to say too to your question though is like so much of the time we think about like the only way I'm going to get into this network is like by finding a way to get directly to this network. And like what happened with Sonja where like she's like I'm just going to write all to all these people and the president of Lionsgate is going to email me directly. Like that's amazing and everybody should kind of take that kind of forward tack. But that doesn't happen all the time either. But the thing that can be your resource is production companies, and that's what people forget about, which is like people like me, people who have companies that actually go into the room and sell content to the networks. Like you might not have a relationship to logo, but I do. And the barrier to entry with me, it's still high, but it's not as high. And what you can do is like look at who's got shows right now on all the places we were talking about before, on Logo and IFC and VH1, and see who's doing content that's similar to the kind of content that you're trying to make, and figure out how you can get your teaser into like their director of development's inbox, because that's somebody who's like 32 years old and living in Brooklyn or LA and probably at the time to like watch your content in their inbox. So like that's the other thing, which is like it's not just about agents and managers and it's not just about networks.
Yeah.
The prodcos are your friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at NYTV Festival because Man Babies is a great fit for the TBS network. I really like the comedy TBS is doing, and I think my voice matches really well with their platform. Also, my friends created Search Party, which is one of their shows right now. I emailed that production company so many times, tried to get in so many times with that production company. Never happened, but I saw that the head of comedy at TBS was doing a panel at New York TV Festival. I went to the panel and I was listening to the panel and he was like, don't email me your projects. Email them to my partner at
And they all
turnerbroadcasting.com.
say
And he
it
just
in
gave
these
the
panels.
email
It's
address. So
amazing.
I was like looking around, I was like, I'm just gonna write that email. And I wrote him an email saying, hey, my agent could do this because we don't accept unsolicited materials, which is another thing. You'll get that all the time. We don't accept because of legal blah, blah, blah. But I was like, my agent could send you my materials, or I could just save that your time and my time and write this personally. Your business partner told me to email you. Because he told everyone to email you.
I'll tell you this thing about the unsolicited materials too. Yeah, we all say it, but like if I get an unsolicited log line in my inbox and it's fire, I've got a document that sits on my desktop that I literally attach into that email and say, I'm sorry, I cannot read your log line or any such pitch materials until you sign off on this release form. And then I send you that release form because I genuinely want to engage with your content. So like all of us, yes, we get deluged with content and a lot of it is not good, but I read every email that comes into my inbox, and if something seems shiny and special, you get that document back from me.
And I got a call. I had a phone call with the head of comedy at TBS, and we talked about Man Babies for an hour. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that happened.
They're everywhere. I mean, at festivals, people are just wandering around. Like ITV Fest,
I mean-
IFC was there, HBO was there. They were like next to us at dinner. I mean, people, you have to go to these things.
Yeah.
It's
We're
just
at
part
these
of it.
festivals because one, we want to meet people. Like I love festivals where I can meet emerging creators. I believe in mentoring. You know, to what Tyler said before about wanting to be a resource, like that's how most of us feel. Like most of us struggled at some point in our career. We want to give back because we know it wasn't easy for us. Yeah, and then the other reason I want to go to festivals is to party really, really hard. So like,
Parties are great.
tailgates really work.
Yeah.
They're really effective. But we're all there to hang out. So
Yeah.
go to these festivals. They're huge resources, the good ones.
Absolutely.
More questions?
So, Robin, I know about your movie Interference. Congratulations. I know Ruya as well.
Yes.
My question is, you sold your script. What was the process from beginning to end? Why did you have to do these 20 revisions? And can you just say the process of selling that script?
Yeah, okay, so to preface this is my pilot maturity. It won a competition, so it was a lot easier for me, I think, than selling a script would normally be. So I entered a screenwriting contest that was sponsored by IFP and made in New York. The homepage for this script contest went under my radar. People sent it to me. I didn't have a script ready to go, so I literally wrote one and submitted it in 5 days because I was like, oh shit, I might as well take advantage of every opportunity, which is another thing. Take advantage of every opportunity, even when you're not prepared. Put something together. So I submitted the script and they called and they said they loved it, and I ended up getting a pretty sizable production deal from it. So it was an amazing process, but not without a lot of input, you know, because what I found out throughout the development process, the film is, the script is about a senior living facility in the Bronx. And that was the one thing, you know, the crucial thing that really hooked them was the setting and the characters, and then the fact that it was a comedy. But that's all they wanted to keep. In the end, I was like, oh wow, you guys literally just bought like a one-line log line, and now we're starting. It wasn't totally from scratch, but there was a lot of reshaping involved in terms of who these characters were, the overall arc of the pilot, and you know, I had an amazing executive producer, Jamie Zillermeyer, and a whole bunch of other people that were really heavily involved. And you know, it was a different process than I think most scripts go through. Maybe, I don't know.
But what you're saying about competitions, if you're trying to sell your script, the more competitions that you can even be a finalist. So the last 4 years I've been a finalist for Sundance each year. I get really close to the end and then I don't end up getting it, and I'll see that the writer who got it is like a writer who literally was writing for Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Like they're picking the highest
Yeah.
level, and they should, right? But just getting that leverage of being a finalist helped me get lit representation. So using those things, like we don't always, we think that the updates that we need to tell industry people have to be like, I want a damn Oscar. But it's amazing how just things that to you, you're like, is it good? But I'll follow up with people that I like and admire whenever I have a new update, and then they're like, wow, she's a proactive person. And that like adds up to be the kind of client that they want to represent.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, contests and festivals absolutely
huge.
are so huge. I mean, my writing career really started because of the Academy Nickel. I was like top 50 with a script there, and then people started paying attention. I had written like 5 or 6, admittedly not great, features before that, and like had films at Tribeca, had all these things, but nobody really cared until I won this contest, and I was like, whoa, this is weird. But it is, I mean, it's like, it's a way for people to, you know, vet your work without, it's just like a vetting process that people use, which, you know, it's
and then eventually,
Sorry, please, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say eventually you're just sending a cover letter that's like Robin can say she had a short that went to Tribeca, she was a Nichols Fellow like finalist, and that she sold a script with an IFP link, and you use those things, and then suddenly you're no longer the wild card that people won't meet with.
Exactly.
And that was the change for my career when I could name those things. Then suddenly people took me more seriously.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I should note too, I don't know if you're asking about scripts within the context of, you know, episodic television or feature films, but I think it's important to like note that there's a big difference, which is that like when you sell a feature script, it's the blueprint for a single product that's going to get made, short of like you unspooled the newest Harry Potter franchise. But when you're selling a television pilot, what you're really selling is the blueprint for what should be 50 to 100 hours of television. Television is built off of repeatability. If you think about the greatest television shows of all time, the longest running television shows of all time, they can all kind of be reduced down to like a 2-line, highly emotionally charged logline or theory or concept, right? Like every episode of Cheers is about loneliness. Every episode of Friends is about that time in your 20s when your closest friends replace your nuclear family, right? And that's why the show runs for 11 years, but then ends the second that everybody couples off. right? So every TV show inherently has that. And the thing about scripted television is that your pilot has to boil that ethos down really, really concisely. It has to be very apparent on the page, and it also has to really clearly signal how this thing can run for 99 more episodes into syndication, which is something to really think about. So that's one thing to think about. Like, when you're bringing out a television pilot, does it signal the run of the show? Like, does it signal how this thing could run forever and ever and ever and ever? The other thing to think about with television pilots is, you know, a feature goes out, and this is true of features too, frankly, which is like, there's only so many buyers for independent films. There's only so many studios that actually buy films, right? So you have to know who your buyers are. But in television, you really have to know that. Like, NBC and CBS's buying practices are not the same. I've seen Comedy Central's buying practices are not the same. So you might have a thing and be like, I have a comedy that's going to go to all of these places. Most TV shows can be bought, any TV show on its own can only really be bought at like 5 or 6 places. So you really have to know what those places are. You have to be really thoughtful about what they're buying and why. You have to really think about, does my show belong there? And then it should be the best version of that show possible, because scripted, you really only get one shot to bring a scripted concept into a room, which is not true in unscripted, but is very, very much so true in the scripted television space. So revise until you're sure it is great and it checks off those boxes.
And I think that is actually why the development process took so long with my script, is because I didn't really write it with their market in mind. There were pieces of it that they latched onto and found interesting. The concept appealed to them, but the actual script was very, very strongly my voice.
The piece of the puzzle I'm not clear on is, in terms of publicist, when to bring in that marketing team. I'm kind of a one-woman band at the moment, because I'm directing it, I wrote it, produced it. Amazing people were involved, and I'm so grateful, but I really do feel like I'm like doing this right now.
It's gonna feel like that for the rest of your life. sorry to break it to you, but
Are you gonna self-release it online, or are you looking to do a festival?
I'm thinking of doing festival, because one, I've worked really, really, really hard on kind of it being visually interesting, and basing it around what I had, like one location, and I feel like I'm hitting those marks. So I think the strongest point for me is making it a calling card and a really strong proof of concept. So as I go into the festival submission process, which is going to start for me in the beginning of September, I'm really racing hard to sort of be ready for that. I don't know if I'm being super naive that it's like, honey, you should already be doing your marketing right now, or you know, I don't know if I should worry about that or not.
Just one thought on the proof of concept thing. Just make sure it stands alone also as a product for the festival point of view, because they have to put it back to back with 10, 20, 30 other films too.
Yes.
But someone else want to take the marketing portion?
Well, I'll say one thing about it, and I feel like she'll have some great insights on this. But you know, this goes back to the idea of like be pitching all of the time. So marketing is part of your pitch process too, right? And it's about the story that you tell around your story, and making sure that that is sticky and attention grabbing too, because that matters, right? Like Sonja's got a great story behind you. I was in all these Scientology industrials. Holy fucking shit, that's a great story.
Well, mine is
so
personal based.
So if I were you, I would, as you start to do your submissions, I would certainly be looking to start introductory conversations to publicists that you're interested in working with. And I would use that as an opportunity to pitch to them both what you think the stories that you're marketing here, and also get their insights. And use those insights to build them into your festival application process, because the story behind the story matters as much as the content on the screen.
And I think that is the nugget or the strength that I have with the project, is it is really based in personal experience, and that is semi-relevant to now. Someone even was saying to me, like, submit to Modern Love on New York Times, or whatever it is you can do to kind of generate attention around even that voice.
I think having those really strong visuals, because that's the very first thing, that having the best stills, that was one of a huge thing for me that really helped. Another thing I found with publicists, it can be a bit tricky, that they won't take you on until they know that you have a festival strategy and that you are premiering at the Berlins and the Cannes and the South Bys. And then there's that second tier of festivals where you have to be really careful that you don't just accept that cool small festival early on because you only get to premiere once. So it's like aim for those giant ones first,
Right.
but maybe don't spend all your money there because that's really expensive. Pick like
Right.
3. If you don't get into those 3, then go for the awesome state festivals, right? Your
Yeah.
Bostons and your Clevelands and your Atlantas. And then if you find some traction there, then you're going to be in a good place and you'll be able to find some publicists. But if not, and you're aiming for the smaller, more niche festivals, there are, like, I don't know if your film has like gay content, but like finding the right homes in those big festivals. Because if you end up premiering somewhere that is kind of lackluster and then it just ends up online and it's not like a video staff pick of the week, it just kind of gets stuck and no one sees it. So it's like really doing all of that plan so you push it out into the world with momentum
Yeah.
and excitement. Otherwise, we've all had things that have fizzled.
I hired in 2014 my film Trust Me, I'm a Lifeguard. Premiered at the Tribeca Film
That was
Festival.
crazy. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Like,
And I hired a publicist, and it was the largest waste of money. So like,
it goes both ways.
and look, I've hired PR and publicists every year for my cocktail festival, and every year these people are so overpriced and they underdeliver. I am such a pessimist for that whole world because why? I get heated about this because it's like you work in PR and publicity, yet my film or my personal page has more social following times 4 than your company does, and you work in PR.
And they
So-
don't guarantee anything.
and they don't guarantee
No,
anything.
That's the...
In my opinion, also short films are very unique because there is no market for short films. Okay, that doesn't exist.
We hear the whiplash stories
It's-
of people,
yeah,
but for the
it
most
doesn't
part...
exist. So nobody is also writing reviews of short films. That is. So who are these publicists talking to? It totally is. Unless your film wins South by Southwest and it's Thunder Road, and then they're like, oh my God, it just won Sundance. Yeah, we're gonna write about that.
Well, I'll tell you this
Okay,
story. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
I'm sorry. We've all made short films. It's gotten
Inject a
very
little bit of
heated.
hope and positivity into the conversation because I managed all of the publicity, marketing, and press for my short that was at Tribeca the year after Tyler's. And it really was about creating a cohesive rollout for publicity. Like, I did press releases, I followed up. I had an EPK ready to go. We had an amazing, poster, postcards with all of the information. I did one sheets for the films. I put press kits together, like hard copy, stuck them in the press lounge. I would camp out and hey, what's up? Saying hello to everybody. And we did generate about 10 pieces or 10 reviews out of that. And then I went and revised the one sheet and I put the little bullets with and we had a website, and the stills is a really
I'm sorry,
good.
this is when you went to Tribeca?
When
or
I
this
went to
was before?
Tribeca, but it was also before, I was trying to find ways, there are blogs and stuff that will let you guest write a blog post,
That's a good
and
idea.
some of the bigger ones.
That's a good
For
one right there.
maturity, I reached out to Filmmaker Magazine, and I was like, here's my article and how I did this and all of that. You really just have to think creatively about how you're going to get this little tiny piece of amazing news through the static, because the internet is a big, crazy, loud place with everyone screaming at the same
And
time.
there is also something very new that's happened in the last 2 years with regards to short films, is that online magazine publications have become platforms for the showcasing of short films. New York Times does it, Vice does it, Topic Magazine does it, and these are great platforms. Nylon Magazine does it. These are great platforms to get your short films seen by tons and tons and tons of eyeballs.
Yeah, but while you're prepping your
After,
festival
right.
strategy before, I strongly advise putting together an amazing poster and having that be your thumbnail for your Without a Box and Film Freeway or whatever. It just looks more complete. I don't think you need to go to the whole EPK.
No,
Stills
well-
are crucial.
I mean, I think that thinking about what you're using this short film for, so you can have a strategy of how, when you're going to festivals, when it premieres, what you want out of this. Are you trying to meet certain production companies? Are you trying to use this to get representation? Because I did things for years trying to get the agents and managers, And now I realized accidentally through being at a party at Sundance that lawyers were the gatekeepers to everything. And my lawyer is only making 5% of any sale that I make. So he's working harder than the publicist that I'm paying a flat fee per month to get me things and get me indoors.
And look, here's the thing you have to remember, which is like all these people, you know, I have great agents, I love my agents, but all my agents do is open a door for me. It's my job to go through the door.
Yes.
And your relationship with a good publicist is not dissimilar. Like, they cannot guarantee anything, but like, I'll tell you guys the story, which is I had a feature film in Tribeca last year called Flames that I produced and co-starred in. You know, the movie was a really small micro-budget documentary filmed over the course of 6 years. It dealt with 2 filmmakers and artists who dated briefly for 8 months, and during that 8 months, you know, recorded everything that they did in their relationship in the process of their falling in love, including their brutal falling out of love. And then got together every 6 months after that to film new material as they reviewed the past material, as they tried to process and come to terms with the breakup of their relationship. And it was a really small movie, but a really beautiful, kind of brutal movie.
Beautiful movie. Try to see it.
And you know, we knew that in a crowded festival market, you know, we stood a chance of getting ignored. And so we went to our publicist and we said to him, please tell the press and tell Tribeca's press arm that the following celebrities are coming to our red carpet premiere. And we submitted a fake list of 20 celebrities. And we showed up on our red carpet all wearing masks of David Byrne and Kim Deal and Marina Abramovich and all the celebs that we had told the press were coming. And we stood there on the red carpet while paparazzi yelled at us and called us assholes for 20 minutes. But we were the only movie that showed up in page 6 through the entire run of the festival. And it certainly helped in our eventual sale. So I bring this up because we found a publicist who understood who we were, who understood that we had made a batshit movie, who understood that publicity around the movie had to rise to that level. And when we were like, we want to do this crazy thing that might fuck up your relationships to some journalist that you really like, he was like, okay. And that's what you want.
Where did you ultimately sell it?
Film Rise.
Awesome.
Film Rise.
And I mean, we just won at Harlem for a documentary, right? Where the New York Post, before the film came out, called it the festival darling at the festival. And this happened because the New York Post covered the action of the documentary that was happening in the streets of New York with the New York PD. I mean, that relationship happened because they were there, because we had that, and then let them know about the festival, then they called it, they proclaimed it a festival darling, which made it for a great story. But we didn't have a publicist.
We know where Tyler stands.
Another question?
Yes.
What do you know about like the festivals when you pre-select for Academy Award? Were you involved in a project like that who got pre-selected? And if yes, can you tell me what happened after, or how that person used that notoriety, that
So you're asking specifically about festivals that serve as like the way that Palm Springs, for instance, like is a pre
Academy.
Academy
qualifier.
qualifier.
Like
Yeah,
the list of 100 qualifying ones on Film Freeway kind of
Yeah.
thing.
I mean, my because money is scarce, the best thing to do is to focus on where you live and the big 5 festivals, okay?
But that's not my question. Were you involved in a film that got pre-selected, like won a category in a
I
film?
went through the category for the Emmys, getting like my web series Emmy qualified, and I can talk about that process. I haven't done the Oscar qualifying shorts yet, though I'm trying to do that now with my short, and I'm strategizing about those particular festivals that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because you have to do a certain amount of them, and then you have to win at a certain amount, and then it's
You have to win one, right?
you have to win one.
Or 4 wallet.
Yes, or
If
pay
you
to
really
have
want to.
your film at a certain amount of
Yeah.
years, and you know, in the New York and
But
LA.
a lot of those, even if you get into those festivals that are Academy qualifying, then you have to fly yourself out there just to go to those. Like
No, I'm just saying if
Ohio.
you win.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is if you win. That's all I'm saying.
Right. I mean,
I've
if
never
you
won
win,
an Academy
from the
qualifier.
moment you win, what's your view on the openings it creates and how you?
I can actually.
Yeah.
I did not win. I have a friend that won the Short Film Academy Award, if that's helpful to you.
Yeah, we did.
And it was. I don't want to share too much of his story, but it still took him a very long time to get his next film made. that he had been trying to make for 12 years. And, you know, he put a lot of love and blood, sweat, and tears into everything, but it still took, I think, another 3 years after that to get that film made. So it's not, nothing's a sure bet, you know? You just gotta always be, I still think that it's worth it to try to win Academy qualifying
I'm fully
festivals.
going to try that strategy for my short.
Yeah.
I know I'm insanely ambitious, but I feel like any sort of, when I did that, when I was pursuing that, the short form Emmys for Doomsday, it opened up so many doors for me.
It does.
I'm saying that because my film is
Yeah.
in festivals, and I won Best Short Film in Cleveland, which is
One of the qualifiers.
So I actually qualified.
Congratulations! So you'll
So I
know
want
more
to
than we
know,
do.
that was like 2
You
weeks
know,
ago.
Next year, please join
Yeah,
us.
please come to this panel.
I'll answer that question.
I've found articles online, and I listened to a podcast recently of a woman talking about navigating that particular thing, but I don't think any of us have done that yet. I've been focused on the TV side.
Okay.
And yeah.
I think though the bigger takeaway, look, there's a lot of different reasons to go to festivals, and you have to be really clear about what your goals are when you go to a festival. So if you're going that route, because like what your goal is here is to try and pre-qualify for an Academy Award, and then hopefully win an Academy Award, that's kind of the goal in itself. Nobody, like winning a short film Oscar, winning any Oscar doesn't guarantee you your next
Anything.
film. I mean,
Right.
unfortunately, the nature of especially independent film is that you're constantly reinventing the wheel. Every project is its own LLC. Every project is its own, financial raise. Every project goes through, a nightmare production and post and all that magic, and then hopefully gets bought by one of the 6 companies that actually still buys independent film. So it's
Yeah.
it's rough. So what I'll say is like, congrats on Cleveland. I hope you get your nomination, and I hope that like for you, that's the goal in of itself. you
Well,
know?
I'm a Canadian, so for Canadians it's different because we got lots of grants.
Yes.
Once we have this recognition, they listen to
That's
us
good.
more. So.
Also
Yeah,
because you can
definitely opens
escape
doors.
our political nightmare.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It is different for you.
Yeah.
We only have about 3 minutes left. Is there one more quick question?
Lightning
I know
round.
she's
Anyone
been.
have it?
Oh,
Yeah.
me?
Yes,
I,
you,
I
yeah.
have just a very simple question actually. What would your advice be for someone that has ideas for films or pilots but has trouble putting that into paper and turning that into a screenplay, whether that's because of a language barrier, it's like English is a second language, or just something they're struggling with?
The first thing I'd say is find a collaborator.
Same
I
thing.
mean, that is,
That's- yeah.
look, not everyone is a writer. And it's really important to acknowledge where your gifts lie and where your energy should go, because that's a resource that is finite. So you have great ideas, you struggle to put them onto the page for any number of barriers. And look, I work with lots of gifted people, directors and producers, who struggle with the same thing and have successful careers, and it's because what they've learned how to do is empower people to work alongside of them. So find somebody whose voice you trust, who understands your ideas, and who makes your work better and makes your life easier.
I found my collaborators by doing a program at Labyrinth Theater Company that does really cool stuff, and it was about pairing producers and writers and directors together. And that was, I thought I was going to take a class like that so I could get in with like the Philip Seymour Hoffmans that were running the company at the time. And I didn't realize that the gift I was getting was the other people that were equally at my level, that were all excited about making projects, and we made the first feature together.
Which company?
Labyrinth Theater Company.
Oh, Labyrinth.
They do really cool,
Yeah.
diverse
Oh, yeah,
work,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and they're all about
And they offer
collaborating.
classes?
Yeah, and
Oh,
they do an
okay.
ensemble workshop, and that was where I wrote and directed my first thing.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
a great tip.
You know, so much of these conversations, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think my advice would be slightly different because I never had the good fortune of collaborators. I just had to get better. And it took a really, really long time. It took like 6 years, I'm not kidding. I wrote like 4 features and threw them out. I have a stack of shorts, I just learned to write TV, God knows how, and it takes finding that voice and honing and trying to get better and better and better and always studying your craft. Just work hard at it. I mean, like Michael said, not everyone is a writer. But I kind of believe that like you can be if you find your way of writing.
Yeah, I agree. I'm in a writing class still. Every Tuesday I take this damn class and read 10 pages out loud and get critiqued, and it helps me grow so much.
Can I
So
just-
it's doing it.
Can I just say too that a lot of the times, like for whatever reason, you might not want to write. You might hold yourself back. I would start writing about the things that hold me back.
Yeah.
I would observe the things that hold me back. Like I would start there. I'd start with myself. Just look at yourself in the mirror, and you can even ask a simple question like, what holds me back? And you start observing, you start just jotting it down, even if it turns out to be like a laundry list, like literally 1 to 10, these are the things, like it's not even a story yet, but from those 10 things that you've written down, number 3 or 7 could actually become a movie or an inspiration for a play or a short film, and all of a sudden you just get very much inspired and go, wow. But what's great about that is that it came from you. Sometimes you won't have the luxury of having a collaborator, and I think it's a good idea to just dive into what's holding you back, because you're just that much more powerful and confident, right? Not ego and pride, but confident with your voice, and you'll discover some amazing things. You might discover that you don't want to write plays or scripts. You might want to write novels. I don't know, but you won't know unless you really push yourself. So give yourself a chance first and foremost.
I think though, one of the things that's really important to recognize, so many of these events place emphasis on gatekeepers. How do you get it in front of your script in front of a studio head or an agent or this or that and the other. But the most meaningful relationships that you're going to make it's more about finding your peers is the most critical thing. Finding the people that you can make things with in whatever context you're making with them, that you can go to work with day in and day out, is essential, because the auteur thing is bullshit. We all make things because we whether it's a crew of 3 or a crew of 30, there's that many people that show up to make something with you. Finding the people that you can do that with again and again and again, who are tireless and kind and thoughtful. You want to find those people, and don't just go to the festivals to meet those, to meet the agent at CA. Go to the festivals to meet the person that you can't sit down with and passionately exchange ideas with, and maybe go make a movie with 18 months later.
And make something good, so you're confident enough to push it out there. All right, I think that's all
Thanks,
the time we have today, guys.